Good afternoon. The committee of the whole is called to order, but we will stay on recess until we reach a quorum. Thank you. We're back to recess until we reach a quorum.
The Committee of the Whole is back from recess. We are still on SB 276 TMB LP 149 COTW, the amendment submitted at 114 regarding the Public Defender Service Corporation and alternate public defender. Senator Duenas, you are recognized.
So, Madam Chair, as we broke, the question that I had proffered was, with the correction being made in this section, what are the assurances that the amendment as being proposed would be done under the cap of the current fiscal year budget, as it's not identified as a line item in the earlier chapter for the Office of the Attorney General? I believe that there has been an amendment that has been proffered, so I will conclude my remarks at this point and listen as we go forward, Madam Chair, to see if that fix is something that is proposed. I guess my closing comment would be, I think it would be wrong for us to create this disparity within the pay scale and not have a uniform pay scale for government attorneys, whether they be in the Office of the Attorney General or in the Office of Public Defender. I just think that would be not correct for this body to proceed in that manner. So I will continue to listen, Madam Chair, and I thank you for the opportunity to express my concerns. Jesus Masi.
Jesus Masi, Senator Duenas. On the amendment, Senator San Augustine, you are recognized.
Madam Chair, I have an amendment to the amendment.
Please proceed.
For my colleagues, is listed as SB 276 JSSA LP 149. And my colleagues, all I added is on the last part of the amendment, and shall be paid utilizing their fiscal year 2023 appropriation. Basically, if you want to make an adjustment, pay adjustment, then you take it out of height. We're not authorizing you any appropriation or basically telling you we're not going to support a supplemental. If you want to make the pay adjustment, then take it within your budget. And as I've spoken to a couple of the folks from the staff from the Attorney General's office, they said they support that. That they can handle. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. On the amendment, to the amendment. Vice Speaker, you are recognized.
Jesus Masi, and good afternoon, Madam Chair. I'll rise in support to this proffered amendment by the good OFB Chair to my original amendment, as it gives the clarity, as I mentioned earlier, on where the funds would be coming from. So I stand and rise in support of this amendment.
Jesus Masi, Vice Speaker. On the amendment to the amendment. San Augustine amendment to the amendment. Senator Tidicle, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess this is a question to the author of the amendment to the amendment. What is the total cost for this? Okay. Okay. And while he's getting the total cost for this, Madam Chair, I'll just let my colleagues know that on August 9th, after having a public hearing for the Office of Attorney General, I did send a letter to the Office of the Attorney General regarding the FY20 and FY21 carryover funds. It seems when we asked that question during the public hearing, they actually didn't have that information. So they finally responded to my letter. Actually, I'm sorry, my letter was dated June 9th, and they responded on August 9th. Correction. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Senator San Augustine will yield to the question.
Yes, I'll take the question. What they provided me was that if they do the warm body of approximately plus 6%, they would come up with 216,000. 216 and 175. Out of height now. Keep in mind, it's out of their budget. It's not us appropriating a penny to them. And if it was will include vacancies, it'd be 291, 425.
What? I'm sorry, that last part, please?
Okay, warm bodies, mean there's a person sitting in a position, it's 216,175. If it's with the vacancies, that's inclusive. Warm bodies and vacancies will cost 291,425 for the pay adjustment, which is a 6% increase, is what they're basically saying. I hope that suffices.
It does, but I'm not sure where they're going to pull this additional funding from, because in my letter that I asked where if there was any excess revenue that they can pull money from for their current budget. Then they sent me this letter, of course. They didn't have that answer then on August 9th. And I'm looking at this right now, and it's saying here for any carryover for FY21, they've utilized that funding already. So as of July 30th, 2022, there's approximately $604 remaining in FY21 funds, all of which is expected to cover the FY22 expenses. My question was, what funding source will be used to cover the agency's projected FY22 budget shortfall of the 631 that was brought up earlier? And they said the funds already been used to cover FY22 expenses, except for salaries and benefits and rent. We will continue to fund any outstanding expenses using available of the FY20 and 21 carryover funds. Now, basically, in this letter that was sent to me, they pretty much used everything it's showing here. The last question was, is the $450K worth of encumbrances in FY 2022 part of the $631,000 FY22 shortfall, leaving a balance of $180,000? And the answer that they responded was, we are unsure where the 450 figure is taken from, but we hope that the information provided answers any questions about what funds we use for FY22 shortfalls. So it sounds to me like when we first had the public hearing and the budget bill on their budget, they were saying that in 2019 and 20, there was about 70,000, and then they utilized that, and then in 21, they were going to use their excess revenue or their lapses of 648,155, or 47% of these funds were going to be used to offset the expenses in FY22, which is this fiscal year. So I'm not sure where they're going to get them funding to pay for this. In this letter, and I'll be happy to forward this to my colleagues, and it spells it all out. So let me go ahead and send this to them, and if you have a chance to look at exactly where all their their carryovers went to. And this is an issue, Madam Chair, because a lot of times we don't know as a body if there was we allow them to use their lapse funds for the next year. They don't even tell us what they used it for. And that's probably what was shocking to the Attorney General's office when I asked them these questions, that they didn't come prepared to answer those questions. What are you using with FY21, 19, and 20 on lapse funds? In fact, several other agencies were asked that same question to try and see where we can, fund other areas that were short in the government of Guam. Or come to a reality of, if we're giving them this amount of money every year and they're coming back with a lapse of $200,000 every year, after 3 years, you got $600,000 just sitting there, and we have no idea how it's being spent. So that being said, I do still have reservations on this particular amendment, even though the author is doing everything they can to try and find some justification in this. But the reality is when we come into budget for next term, or whoever senators that are sitting here for next term, we're going to probably be pressured to pay for this because they're going to put it in their budget the next term or the next budget cycle. We're setting precedents here. So I thank you for the opportunity, and I will forward this response letter to all my colleagues. Thank you.
On the amendment to the amendment, Senator Brown, you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and I also echo similar concerns as I relayed earlier. I mean, I understand what the language is saying and the intent that it's going to be paid out of this budget year, and I guess if they don't have enough, then I guess they don't do it and they don't implement it. But it still raises the issue. I mean, looking at the figures that were proposed earlier this morning, it's still going to be a substantial issue of this increase. And again, I don't know what other amendments get added because we want to make everything equitable. And in this case, we're talking about non-law enforcement, and we're doing it at this portion of the budget at this time when we're trying to finish the budget bill. And that's my concern, because while it may satisfy the concern of this year when the money's available, we're not looking at these additional monies as consistent streams of money that's going to be available next year or the year after, the year after. And my concern with regards to that is we give the pay raises and give everybody pay raise, everyone's happy with the pay raise. And then when the cuts start coming, and they will come, who do we cut? Do we take back the pay raises? Do we start cutting personnel, last in, first out? What department or agency are we going to look at the least critical and we're going to start cutting there? Or simply tell the governor, oh, here's your transfer authority, you figure it out. And I just think that's unfair at this time. I mean, at a time when our community has gone through so much challenges with regards to this pandemic, gosh, did we forget that? It just happened, right? Our main industry, while we can say, oh, we want to diversify, the reality still is, you know, the foundation of our economy is still based on the military presence and the buildup, and still, you know, highly dependent on tourism unless someone comes up with some magic solution for a little island in the middle of the Pacific. And we continue to burden our people. It's not us, my dear colleagues. We're not taking the money out of our pockets. We're taking it out of their pocket. And I have to ask our dear people, do they feel in any way, shape, or form they are getting better government than they've ever gotten in their lives now that they have the most expensive government they've ever had to pay for? And I think that's where we need to be cautious. I think we shouldn't be disingenuous with what we're providing right now and taking credit for it. And we're going to leave our people, including those that you're proposing these pay increases for through this process in the budget, hanging. That's the concern. That's why I prefer that these key issues are vetted, you know, with more discussion, more information provided so that we know what the boundaries are of what we're doing. And we're aware of what we're doing, we're aware of the decisions that we're making. Instead of accusing others, well, if you don't care for this, you don't care for the, you don't care for the public defender's office, you don't care for the AG, you don't care for the people. And what we're doing really is unfair to them because they're going to be left at the short end of the stick. And some of you that are proposing this, like I said, you won't be here to carry the burden of the decisions that you're making that are totally unfair. And I can't believe that during this time of financial challenges, this is when we're spending the most money. This is when we're growing the government the most. This is when we're putting the most burden. So while we're racing to spend as much money as we can, then you tell me, where's the extra money going to be to address those other issues? The other schools and the other needs out in our community that have yet to come and will come before this legislature that everyone's going to consider critical. And we're not going to have the money anywhere else other than to cut into the flesh of the government that you're now wanting to fund, because this is a short-term, quick-fix solution another 2 months before another election. And it doesn't really address the real issues of how we're going to do and have a government our people can afford and have services they can afford that are the most critical. So once again, Madam Chair, that's where my reservation is with regards to what's being proposed. This is a short-term fix without addressing a long-term funding source to sustain what you or some of you may be looking at appropriating. With that, thank you for the opportunity to comment.
On the San Augustine amendment to the amendment. On the amendment to the amendment, Speaker Terlahi, you are recognized.
Thank you. I just want to put on the record also my concern that the language in this, the amendment to the amendment, that they shall utilize their FY2023 appropriations, I have no objection to, but it's connected to language that says this this pay adjustment is applicable for fiscal year 2023. And I don't know if I've ever seen anything like that. I'm trying to figure out how that's going to work. It's not an emergency pay. It's not anything like that. It's pay. It's regular pay, adjusted only for 1 year, though. And so what happens next year? I guess I shared the concerns of the previous speakers that this is, you know, how does the next legislature take that back? And why are we limiting it to 1 year? Are they able to take it back after a year? And if they don't, and it looks much more likely, as we've seen things occur here, that it will actually just be covered. It's permanent, it will be covered. I don't know what the real intention, but yeah, it's just, I think, very awkward to tell the employees, we're giving you a raise for 1 year, and it's a raise not because of you know, like during the pandemic, emergency, or conditions or anything like that. So why the temporariness of a pay adjustment? That's my concern. But otherwise, allowing them to use their appropriations for it, I have no objection to that. I just want to point on the record also that the public defenders, the language that was added to the substitute bill for the public defender, where the disparity supposedly has occurred, is not requiring the public defender to utilize their FY2023 appropriations to pay that. It outright appropriates a whole new funding source for them and the alternate public defender to pay for salary increases. The same was done for the judiciary in the substitute bill, where an outright appropriation to the judiciary was given in the amount of $1.6 million to pay for pay raises for all employees of the judiciary, not just law enforcement, not just attorneys, every employee. And we funded that. And so I'm just saying, we're trying to remedy disparity, but I think, you know, there's also some disparity that's being created. Thank you, Madam Chair.
On the amendment to the amendment, are there any objections? There's been an objection. All those in favor of the amendment to the amendment, please signify by raising your hand. Amendment passes. On the amendment as amended, the Tina Muñoz Barnes amendment as amended, 114. Hearing no objections. On the amendment as amended, Senator Blasio, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, what are we doing? I think this is, this budget is contained in so many nooks and crannies, pay raises for everybody, and now we have to correct disparities that we've created in this. And we're doing this at a time when our economy is still trying to recover. And I see that, you know, just in this language, well, let me just go with the language here, and maybe the author of the amendment, if she can yield to the question being, the amendment here says applicable to attorneys of the Attorney General's office. Is this going to be applicable to all the attorneys of the Office of the Attorney General?
Vice Speaker, do you yield to the question?
Yes. Yes. said that earlier, yes.
Yes, thank you. Senator Blas.
You know, normally, when we go through this process, we see before us, and I'm, you know, let's just cross our T's and dot our I's with this. You know, what are they making now? What is this 6% increase going to mean for everybody? There are many unanswered questions to the question before us. And I understand, and as far as the disparity, but we created it, and let's see how we can make sure that it's justified. Let's cross our T's and dot our I's. You know, and yeah, I guess I can speak with a little bit of authority here with regard to, you know, just the disparity that of the attorney's pays within the office of the Attorney General. What disparity are we going to cause there too? You know, right now, you got the prosecuting attorneys making less than their civil litigation attorneys. If this was a matter of wanting to address the office of the Attorney General so that we don't lose good attorneys, but let's also look at who's going to be receiving it. Okay?
Point of information, Madam Chair, if I may.
Please state your point of
I
information.
just want to state for the record that the attorneys within the OAG are all on the same pay scale.
Yeah. You know, I don't want to belabor the point any further than I belabor it. I think we want to correct things, let's correct it the right way. And let's cross our T's and dot our I's before we make decisions such as this. Are they deserving of it? I'm sure that an argument can be made for yes. But what was the root of the issue here? If it goes back to the pay adjustment that was authorized in Part 2 of Chapter 7, we went through this whole exercise with regards to the teacher's pay. Now, what we required of them, wouldn't it be best that we require this of them, of this class of individuals? I'll just sit and listen a little bit more, Madam Chair. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Blas. On the amendment as amended. Speaker Terlahi, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the amendment is to authorize pay adjustments for non-law enforcement personnel in the Office of the Attorney General. And the argument was made that this would remedy a disparity between the Office of the Attorney General's office and the Public Defender Service Corporation's offices, and now also the alternate public defender. Because earlier in the bill, that's what the substitute bill authorized, was pay adjustments for the public defender's office. And even earlier in the bill, the substitute bill, there was an appropriation made of $1.6 million to the judiciary to fund non-law enforcement personnel at 6% and law enforcement personnel at 7%. And still going backwards, all of that based on the governor's executive order mandating an 18% across the board pay raise for all law enforcement officers. So the governor, in her executive order, saying all law enforcement officers, 18%, probably did not create a disparity because all law enforcement officers were being treated the same in every agency. The judiciary thought that was unfair and wanted to give their law enforcement officers 7% instead, and all other non-law enforcement officers 6%. So the public defender asked to copy the judiciary's raise structure and give their law enforcement personnel only a 7% increase in compensation, not the 18%, and to give all its other employees 6%. And all of its other employees includes not just attorneys, but every other employee in the public defender and alternate public defender's offices. All of this we are doing, again, in a budget where during the budget hearings and during other hearings, we had heard testimony from the Department of Administration that they are currently working on a pay study for the rest of the government of Guam. After doing the nurses, doing the teachers, doing the law enforcement, which they found to be priorities and which we all agreed with, I thought, they were going to address the entire government. And many agencies, of course, think that they have employees that are being underpaid and have asked that those be addressed as well. And I've, always instructed them, make sure when DOA is doing its pay adjustments that you get your agencies analyzed, effectively, those positions that need to be. But, so obviously, there's a disparity in executive branch versus judicial branch. There's a disparity between executive branch Public Defender Service Corporation and every other executive branch agency if this bill passes, in law enforcement and non-law enforcement positions, the same classification. If this amendment passes, it ironically creates disparity as well. It would be, the Attorney General's office, another executive branch agency, being treated differently than all other executive branch agencies with the same types of positions. Well, here they're including attorneys. So I'm not sure whether that creates something actionable or not. It's the Attorney General's office that's requesting this change, so I'm hoping that they've looked at that. But there were cases in the past where the legislature gave pay raises to teachers, did not give it to nurses, or retroactive, and there was a lawsuit. They gave it to certain classes of nurses at the hospital and did not give it to nurses at Department of Public Health, and there was a lawsuit. And the government of Guam pretty much lost and was ordered that we have a merit system. We're supposed to be treating our employees equally if they are in the same classifications. And so that's my concern, is that we're doing this without the benefit of the Department of Administration telling us that these are the classes of positions that should have pay increases according, and that these are the classes that we, the legislature, are going to be responsible across the board to compensate. In other words, by passing the public defender's pay adjustment, does that create an obligation on behalf of the government to pay for those same types of positions in every other agency of the government of Guam a 6% raise? And we're condoning that with our appropriation of that. The agency is a little bit more different. It's saying, well, it says it shall be. They shall give this 6% raise to all the attorneys in the office. I'm an attorney. I love the attorneys. I'm sure they'd be very happy to get pay raise across the board over there. You've all seen, I put in an amendment earlier that, we're jumping around in the order here, but it's to specifically fund prosecutors, where they have had a massive exodus of prosecutors, where we are, I don't think, giving our full resources and attention to the prosecution of cases, the law enforcement, by not making prosecutors more attractive than other lawyers across the board. I mean, I personally don't believe that the work is equal for lawyers across the board, and I have asked the Attorney General's assistance in how to make sure that that is addressed. But this amendment, if it passes, I believe, would create potential disparity with other executive branch agencies, with the public defenders, all positions getting 6% increases, and the Attorney General's office, only the lawyers getting 6% increases. So that's what we're looking at now, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. On the amendment as amended. On the amendment as amended, there has been an objection. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. In favor of the amendment as amended. Amendment passes. Vice Speaker Munoz-Barnes, you are recognized. I believe you're moving an amendment for Senator Rogel.
Thank you very much, Cizos Masi. It's Cizos Masi, Madam Chair. This amendment will be on line 11, page 149, a new section to chapter 12, and it would read section 9109, chapter 9, title 11, Guam Code annotated is amended to read section 9109, Cannabis Control Fund created. There is hereby created a separate and apart from all other funds of the government.
Madam Chair, point of order. Just if you can explain how we are addressing this amendment out of order.
Now, Madam Chair, this was my amendment, working closely with Senator Clint. He was supposed to put my name on it, but I gave him, because he was the champion of this, I just gave him the courtesy to work it, and I said I would do it for him, and I had spoken earlier, and I said I would work it, because he's really sick and didn't come in.
Is it the next amendment up, Madam Chair?
Yes. Yes, it is.
I'm sorry. Point of information, which amendment are we talking about here?
Madam Chair, can we take a moment's recess so that we can talk about the amendments coming up, please?
We'll take a moment to recess.
Committee is called back to order. Colleagues, we are now on SB 276 TTT, L1 to 20. Senator Tyree, this is your amendment. Am I correct?
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll just, if you could hold on the timer, allow my colleagues to pull out that amendment first. Okay. Okay. Okay, thank you. I think everybody's had an opportunity to look at that amendment. It is on line 120, 1 to 20, page 48. You know, Mr. Chair, although I was successful in convincing our colleagues during the FY22 budget session to require monthly reports for the ARP funds, the information the administration continues to provide this legislature is far from helpful. You know, particularly at a time when we're discussing the FY23 budget bill. The monthly ARP funding, monthly ARP reports we've received throughout FY22 fail to itemize and describe the details of how federal taxpayer dollars are being used. The monthly ARP reports simply give us a list of Government of Guam agencies that have been allocated funds and corresponding information on total expenditures and encumbrances. With the amendment, I propose that we require the administration to provide policymakers with additional information regarding funds that are being poured into Guam's artificial economy from both the ARP and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. If approved, this amendment requires that going forward, monthly reports shall detail the allocation of funds by the governor and the total expenditure of funds by purpose and project description, a summary of who received funds and what programs, personnel, equipment, supplies, construction activity, etc., were funded by these federal funds. Mr. Chair, this amendment is particularly critical as transparency is absent when it comes to explaining to the people of Guam and the federal taxpayers how exactly $578 million in ARP funding is being spent. And now we have the infrastructure bill that was passed that will also provide additional funding to Guam. With our tourism industry far from pre-pandemic levels and future federal pandemic aid far from certain, this amendment helps to ensure the limited resources we have right now are managed responsibly. So I ask my colleagues, it's a very simple amendment, and I like to thank the OFB chair for incorporating some of the language here, but I think what we did was just to, you know, make it stronger and clear and precise with regards to striking out the, and in place, reporting requirements for funding received from the American Rescue Act Plan of 2021, the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And then so it's basically just cleaning it up. It really doesn't do a lot of changes, but it just rearranges. If you can see my colleagues, the strikeout is just to rearrange the description on this. So that's as simple as that. Also, there was one minor correction to scratch out fiscal year 2022 and put 2023. And throughout the federal funding period, which shall reflect the total amount of funds earmarked for Guam. It's a very simple amendment, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Any of my colleagues like to speak to this amendment? I see no hands. Would you like to close on your amendment? None. Are there any objections to this amendment? I see no hands. Amendment passes. We will now proceed to the next amendment.
Mr. Chair.
The next amendment, well, let me see first, where we at, Renee? Okay, Senator Shelton, you have something to address to us?
Yes, Mr. Chair, notwithstanding the rules of engagement, I ask that you allow me to make an amendment to Section 35 of Chapter 12 at this time.
I'd just like to advise you, as I was addressed by our colleagues here, no new amendment for Chapter 12. So if it's a new amendment, I will rule you out of order. We will stay consistent with what we've been doing when we were in Chapter 11, when I try to make adjustments. So we're in Chapter 12. If it's a new amendment, it will not be entertained.
Yes, Mr. Chair, there was some additional information that we received in the Committee on Tourism right after we opened up Chapter 12, so we missed it by a few minutes, and I'd like to ask you, notwithstanding the rules, to allow me to make this motion at this time, this amendment.
Unfortunately, I rule it out of order. We will not entertain. I have information from the GVB, I understand, but I rule it out of order. No new amendments for Chapter 12. We'll move on from there. All right? And because that was addressed to me by my colleagues here. Stay consistent, Mr. Chair. No new amendments. So with that,
Point of order,
I will
Mr. Chair.
end there.
We did accept a notwithstanding motion just not too long ago to do the amendments out of order. This is a notwithstanding motion. I think it requires a vote.
no, this is
Chair.
to add an amendment to what's already open. This is not how we adjusted it, Speaker. Okay?
It's a
So-
vote, but it's a motion, Mr. Chair, it requires a vote.
I'm ruling it out of order. Are you calling the rule? Are you calling me? Are you calling the order, me out of order, or are you calling me for a vote, or what? Are you overruling the chair, Madam Speaker?
On your ruling that a notwithstanding the
No.
rules motion is out of order, yes, Mr. Chair, I
There-
ask you to reconsider that, or that the body vote on whether to override the chair.
I'm saying, number one, out of order now. If you're calling, is that the rule? The rule out of order, then we'll move from there. But I ruled that we don't allow any addition to Chapter 12. It's been open. Okay? And you're challenging the chair, am I correct, Madam Speaker?
Challenging the ruling that a motion notwithstanding the rules is out of order. Yes, so I would like a vote on that, Mr. Chair.
My understanding, Madam Speaker, is you're challenging the chair on what I've already stated, okay?
Correct,
Okay.
I'm asking for a vote on the motion. The chair said, well, she made a motion, the chair said the motion's out of order, so I'm asking that ruling, that the motion, notwithstanding the rules, is out of order, be overridden, yes.
Okay. My colleagues, you understand what the motion is called for? Is to overrule the chair that I ruled that it's out of order to add any new amendments to Chapter 12. All those in...
Point of inquiry.
Yes, Senator Tyree?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, the author of the motion to open it up to allow one amendment, is it just one, or
It doesn't matter. Once
It
you
just-
allow it, it just opens it up.
the floodgates open?
That's correct. And as a matter of fact, you were the one that asked me to stay consistent. So that's why I'm staying consistent now in Chapter 12.
Yeah, the only problem is,
Okay.
Mr. Chair, that we received a budget that actually did not have the strike-through, so we kind of didn't see certain things in that particular chapter that actually changes laws, certain laws that are already codified. So I can see the situation here where we've discovered certain areas in that chapter that literally didn't even have a public hearing. It changes the laws to Guam, and I think there may be an exception to this, but we'll just call for the vote, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the motion is to overrule the chair. All in favor, please raise your hand. Motion fails. Now we will move to the next amendment. We are now at TMT. TMT, that would be you, Madam Speaker. TMT, is that you? It's over, or TTT, I'm sorry, Senator Tideway. Oh, wait. Hold on, yes. Hold on, let me get back to where we're at.
The Committee of the Whole is back from recess. Speaker Terlahi, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Notwithstanding the rules, I'd like to make a motion to reconsider the last vote on overruling the chair.
On the motion to reconsider the actions of the body on overruling the chair, on the motion, is there an objection to reconsider? There's been an objection. All those in favor of reconsidering the actions of the body, please signify by raising your hand. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. To reconsider the actions of the body. Motion passes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the motion was to overrule, to vote on I had made a motion to overrule the chair on his ruling that the motion to consider Section 35 of this chapter to make an amendment to that, although the amendment had been submitted late. So I had asked to overrule the chair's ruling that notwithstanding motion was out of order. So I guess a vote on this motion would mean that we would be able to consider that amendment.
Are there any objections? There's been an objection. All those in favor of the motion to allow a notwithstanding provision for an amendment
To
to Chapter 12 to overrule the chair, please signify by raising your hand. All those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Motion. All those in favor of the motion to overrule the chair, please signify by raising your hand. Motion fails. Speaker Terlahi, you are still recognized. You have an amendment. You have an amendment next? We are now on the TMT amendment SB 276 L21 P148, submitted at 4:34 p.m.
Madam Chair, before we get to that, I'd just like to raise a point of inquiry regarding Section 36 of the bill, which is the financing of a new Simon Sanchez High School. As I raised a point of order earlier in the discussion on this chapter, the changes in this section to the current statute regarding Simon Sanchez High School are quite significant. They're not shown in the bill. So I'd just like to raise a point of information regarding those. The most significant is that it puts some amounts. One is that an aggregate print, it authorizes the rental payments. It authorizes the financing, including bonds in the amount of $166,365,000. And so that's new in the statute, Madam Chair. It was not there. That's a big change that we are making by adopting this substitute bill. The other one is that the legislature is committing to a $16,377,125 per year leaseback or payment on this. That's a change from $5 million to $16 million. And I think that's quite significant. There's been no discussion on it. I just wanted to raise a point of information regarding that.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. We'll take a brief recess to clarify with the Office of Finance and Budget. I know there was recently submitted a version of the bill for us to look at with strike-throughs and underlines for additions. So we'll take a moment's recess to look at that. The Committee of the Whole is back from recess. Speaker Terlahi, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was raising a point of information regarding the provisions that were added to the substitute budget bill that include financing for the new Simon Sanchez High School in an amount not previously adopted by the legislature of $166.365 million, and with a corresponding rental payment authorization up to $16.37 million per year. That's a change from $5 million per year that was previously authorized, meaning we authorized $5 million a year. They went out, they did design, and now they're saying that based on the design, the construction costs are going to far exceed $5 million a year. They will now be $16 million a year. I think that's quite significant. And the bill, as written, says that this amounts from the time the pledge is made, meaning the financing pledge, the leaseback payments, the bonds, that pledge that this amount will be available per year. And OFB, I asked OFB if this is going to impact, our appropriations next year by $16 million, if it's going to impact our appropriations this year. And they are saying that according to GITA, this does not impact for 3 years, but I don't see anything in these amendments that discuss that, or in their letter, GITA's testimony on the bill itself. I guess, so I wanted to confirm, if the leaseback payments are not due for 3 years, does that mean it's going to take 3 years to build this Simon Sanchez High School? And that's pretty much, for me, the most important question, is that what we're authorizing here? Again, the 3 years is not in here, but that's what they're saying. Otherwise, we are going to be impacting our current budget by $16 million, next year's budget by $16 million, and I think that's very significant. I don't know if we've planned for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Speaker. Okay, thank you very much for that point of information. You are recognized on your amendment. We are now on SB 276 TMT, line 21, page 148, COTW, 4:34 p.m., regarding the Guam Preservation Trust Fund income. Speaker Terlahi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the substitute budget bill includes a provision that makes a very significant change as to where building permit fees are going to go. Section 39 of this chapter is amending current statute, which dictates where building permit fees go. The section does not show in this bill before us how the current statute reads. It simply shows how they want it to read. It did not show which parts are going to be deleted, not only in this, but other statutes that are not even mentioned in this section of the bill. So I don't think senators are fully apprised of the true impacts of this section 39, the way that it is written today. And again, these are significant changes. The current statute is written, section 76002 of Title 21 actually reads that 50% of all fees collected, and these are building permit fees, shall be deposited in the Guam Preservation Trust Fund. Fines collected under another provision shall be deposited into the Guam Preservation Trust Fund. The Guam Preservation Trust Funds shall be maintained separate and apart from all funds, and DOA is the custodian of the fees. Section 39 of the bill would change that 50% of the building fees to 100% of the building fees are going to now go to the Guam Preservation Trust. And in other parts of the code, not even mentioned in the bill before us, which I find to be a huge defect, it's the other parts of the code that dictate where that other 50% are going. And we don't show that we are, in effect, changing those statutes as well, because we're taking 100% of the fees. So in other parts of the code, 25% of the building permit fee goes to DPW for the purposes of hiring licensed engineers. And I checked with DPW, and they currently do not have a licensed engineer. That's why this money was set aside, to help them to compensate and compete in order to hire a licensed engineer. The other 25%, pursuant to another section of law, goes to the Guam Museum Fund. There's also a portion of the fees that the State Historic Preservation Office received in 2020. So the amendment to strike out the entire section, my amendment is to strike out the entire section 39 of chapter 12, which would then leave the current statute, the current laws intact, and maintain the current percentage breakdowns for the building permit fees. And that is 50% to Guam Preservation Trust, 25% to DPW, 25% to the Guam Museum Fund. There is a bill that has been heard in regards to this amendment, and I would suggest that we allow that bill to proceed so that we can have full discussion, full disclosure as to all the statutes that are actually implemented by taking 100% of the building fees, and what the impact of that will be on DPW and the museum and the Guam Preservation Trust, of course. The State Historic Preservation Officer testified in opposition to this, the bill that reflects this amendment here, or this provision of Section 39, because it would impact their budget and the budgets of DPW and the Guam Museum. He confirmed that the Guam Museum, that 25% of the building fee equals about $250,000 for them a year, and $250,000 for DPW as well. All of these agencies do important work. So, and I am in no way questioning the importance of the work of the Guam Preservation Trust. But if we are going to defund DPW engineers, defund SHPO work with State Historic Preservation, which is the enforcement arm of our preservation statutes. It's not the grant funding, it's not the projects, it's the enforcement, the regulatory arm of our preservation. Or the Guam Museum. $250,000 out of the Guam Museum's budget is quite significant, Madam Chair. That's $500,000 total from these other agencies giving to GPT, in addition to what GPT already receives. We recently appropriated $3.5 million to the Guam Preservation Trust for one project in Humatak. They received grants. The Guam Preservation Trust receives grants from GIDA. They received CARES Act funding, ARP funding, federal funds. They received the full amount of fees from vandalism of historic properties. So I just think that instead of increasing their percentage of the building permit fees on the backs of these other agencies, that we, especially to do it during a budget bill, we're not able to bring them in and fully discuss this, or I mean, in addition to the issues that were brought up at the public hearing, that we allow that bill to go forward, to come to the floor, so that we are able to fully vet it. And that perhaps we can find another way, if, you know, to take care of those other agencies. So it's simply that, Madam Chair. They do great work, but so does the Guam Museum. So does in fact, the Guam Museum is responsible right now for the NAFTA Yamanai Shrine, way behind schedule. And again, the DPW. So my amendment is to delete the entire Section 39 of the bill, leave the statutes intact, leave the funding to those different agencies intact, leave the 50% of building permit fees to Guam Preservation Trust, but allow the 50% as previously authorized by law to go to those other agencies. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. On the amendment, Senator San Augustine, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I support that, and I appreciate that the oversight chair for those agencies saw that. That this was requested to be included. I don't object to her explanation why we need to delete Section 39 in its entirety on page 149 all the way to page 149. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. On the amendment, Senator Blas, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, just so that we can be very clear, it's not to amend Section 39, but it's to delete it. Okay, because the way it's written here is just to amend it. And if the intent is to delete it, then I think we should be clear there that you're going to delete Section 39. That way you keep the law that's still, as it is, intact. It may be misperceived that we are intending to strike out the law. And I know that's not the case because of the amendments and stuff. But I think this should read to delete Section 39. Okay. Ma'am, is that just to make sure that it's clear with the author?
Sure. Do you yield?
Pose the question. Is that was the whole intent, right?
Yes, it's the equivalent of what we're trying to do by saying
Right.
amend and strike through all. We're showing that we are deleting by
but
striking through the whole thing.
But
That's correct.
If you delete Section 39, this language doesn't exist.
Exactly the same. Exactly the same. And that's why we are showing it with a strike through so that no one is confused. And this is actually the format that is required by our standing rules, is that we show with a strike through how we are affecting that section. And the strike through shows a deletion. Thank you.
Thank you. On the amendment, Senator Brown.
Madam Chair, I'm the one who introduced Bill 208 with regards to returning funding to the Preservation Trust. I did not put this language, but at the same time, I think some things need to be clarified with regards to the trust. This issue is brought up about all the other things this money does do now, but I do want to point for the record, this money was taken from the trust to begin with. The original creation of the trust provided this funding, this specific funding to the trust to act independently, so that they could proceed to do the work that they were mandated to do, and they've done quite successfully in the now 30 years that the trust has been in place. So while we talk about the Guam Museum that was built after, and we talk about DPW, and certainly I got more connection and experience at DPW than anybody else in this room. Also with regards to Parks and Recreation, yes, that's important work that they do, but while this legislature so far has appropriated millions and millions of dollars in this budget for things that never happened yet. We're so free-flowing with money, we could so easily address a couple $100,000 to address the Guam Museum. Or the other things that were taken from the trust that has put them in a very difficult situation of not being able to meet their mandates because they cannot independently move forward in funding projects to the rate they used to be able to do. And now we politicize the trust because now, they have to come now to the Guam Legislature and get appropriations for projects. What the previous speaker had mentioned, that money's all going to a single project, which the trust in and of itself could have accomplished without our interference. It's hard to believe that the legislature that did this language originally did it at the time this particular building that we are all sitting in the comforts of and the greatness of, through the assistance of the Preservation Trust on a building that sat here for 25 plus years. And so while the trust assisted the Guam legislature to rebuild this very building that was built in 1947, that same legislature took away their funding and has left them to limp through this whole process moving forward because it's taken away the funding that they were independently able to receive to meet their mandates. There are so many other entities, unfortunately, in the government that don't deliver on their mandates consistently. And I think it's very hard to argue that the Guam Preservation Trust, not only have they met, they far exceeded even what my expectations would be. And I'm not the original creator of the legislation. That goes to late Elizabeth Areola, I believe Madeline Bordallo, former Vice Speaker Ted Nelson, those that envisioned the creation of the trust to be independent, to meet its mission. And now, for a few $100,000, we're going to say, oh no, this is not important. There's so many other things that are even have far more implications in this budget bill that are odds and ends that probably shouldn't even be here. But some look at a way to expedite the process because maybe if it stood alone, maybe it would draw too much attention, maybe it wouldn't get so much support if we put too much attention and too much light of day on it. So let's stick it in the budget bill. I have no problem moving my own bill forward, but I do have an objection to how this is being portrayed as if it's the trust trying to steal everybody's money and be inconsiderate and uncaring. Because at least I have to tell you at the public hearing, we didn't discuss the fact that pretty much the trust itself came out and said, yes, we support this. Many, many other testimonies. And yet when I looked at the committee report, except for one senator on that committee who happens to be sitting to my immediate right, everybody else only voted to report out only. Let's just report it out, but we're not going to support it. I mean, we see that kind of nonsense go on, and then this gets put in the budget, and now we're going to take it out, and all these justifications why it should be taken out. Gosh, that applies to quite a substantial percentage of what is currently in this particular budget. It's not a process I care for. I didn't put this language here. But you know what? I'm going to go bat. I'm going to go to bat consistently for the Preservation Trust because they've set an example of the standard I certainly, and I think many people want to see in this community, even though they're not a government agency. But they're funded through the revenues that come through this government, and they've done an exceptional job. And I hate to see that the example of doing that is to decrease their ability to do what they've been doing. Literally take it away from them. Take advantage of them. Because we use them to get what we want that benefit us, and then we dispense with them by taking their funding. I'm not arguing the importance of the museum. I know when that museum was built. I can see the benefits of that museum. But my dear colleagues, for all the millions you're so quickly able to appropriate for things that have yet to be funded, something that has been institutionalized for 30 plus years that continues to set the kind of example and the standard that we want to see to preserve our resources, to preserve our culture, to preserve our language, to preserve our storytelling. How about all of you that, oh, we support POGET, let's protect POGET, let's make sure we don't have, we're not having guns from the military shooting, we don't want a rifle range in POGET. Who the heck came to stand up on that issue? My dear colleagues, did we so quickly forget? But when the time comes to support them with what? A few $100,000? We're going to say, oh no, we're going to take this out because this doesn't fit and it shouldn't be. Gosh, let's let that apply to so much of what's in this budget bill right now. The problems we are yet presenting to our people by all the odds and ends that we've included here, that the very mover of this particular amendment, all of those things so well fall into what she said. But we're going to do that for the other things. But something that's more deserving, that has delivered, that has consistently shown their ability to do their job and do it well. While we're all at their events and their storytelling and their presentations of history, while we benefit from their labor, we want to return and politicize their projects because now they have to come to the Guam Legislature and get favor for their projects that they need to do. And I just don't think that's right. That's why I didn't vote for the bill. I think we need to be consistent in what we do, and we need to support those that do well. Because this, to me, what, a few thousand out of this billion-dollar budget? I support what she said, all these other projects, but I don't support it at the expense of the trust being able to act and operate independently. If they were not delivering, then I could understand. I'll be one of the first to say, hey, we need to change that. But they've done exceptionally well. And now we're going to say, oh, we're not going to give them back their funding so that they can operate and do what they've been doing so well, without having to come to us and politicize their projects, so that we can say, oh, we passed the bill. Make sure we're at the ribbon cutting, because guys, it's all about us, isn't it? We just pretend we're there for the people. I just don't think that sets the example. And sure, hey, I'll go to bat, however, wherever. I mean, in this particular case, somebody put this in the bill, and it's here, and I'm going to bat for the trust, and I'm going to object, because I do support the trust. And if I can't get a bill on the floor of this legislature, then fine. I'll support it in this, keeping it here in this current budget that I got some big question marks about. So with that, I have no further comment, colleagues, but be mindful. This is not the trust taking anything away from anybody. All of this was taken by the trust, I'm sure, because at that time the legislature probably didn't have the funding to fund all these other things. And they looked at this as a source of funding, and they cut the trust in half. They cut the trust in half. And I think we should restore the trust, restore their funding so that they can do the job that they've, as I said, not just been able to deliver, they've done exceptionally. Because I can't imagine anyone here is going to stand up and say, oh, we don't support the Preservation Trust and the good work that they're doing. So with that, Madam Chair, I'm going to object to this particular amendment.
Thank you, Senator Brown. On the amendment, we will take a recess now for a break and come back at 6:30 p.m.